What if the innocent heart of a child was all that stood between life and death? One stormy night, a desperate golden retriever appeared at the doorstep, pregnant, wounded, and begging for help. What happened when a child opened the door brought tears to everyone's eyes. This is a story of instinct, compassion, and a miracle no one saw coming. What happens at the end will truly surprise you. So stick around, you won't regret it. If you love stories that move your heart and open your mind, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Now, let's dive in. Thunder crashed against the windows as lightning split the sky in half. Rain pelted down relentlessly on the roof of a modest suburban home nestled in a quiet neighborhood. Inside, 5-year-old Ollie sat on the floor, playing with his toys, unaware that something extraordinary was about to unfold just beyond the front door. Then, there was a faint sound. A whimper, so soft that had the wind picked up at that moment, they might have missed it entirely. Ollie's heart skipped a beat. He turned toward the front door, eyes wide. "Mommy," he whispered, tugging gently at Grace's sleeve. "Someone's out there." Grace paused, her ears straining in the silence between thunderclaps. Then she heard it too, soft scratching at the door, followed by another gentle whimper, this time slightly louder and more urgent. Her maternal instincts kicked in immediately, a mix of concern and caution battling inside her. She placed a protective hand on Ollie's shoulder. "Stand back, honey," she said gently, moving him behind her as she stepped closer to the front door. The porch light flickered, casting a ghostly glow through the rain. As Grace peered through the glass panel, her breath caught in her throat. There, drenched from the storm and shivering violently, stood a golden retriever. Her fur was matted, her eyes wide and pleading. And she was clearly pregnant. Grace's heart twisted at the sight of the desperate animal. She looked as though she'd been wandering in the storm for hours. The dog didn't bark or growl. She just stood there, motionless, with eyes locked on Grace's, as if begging silently for help. Grace hesitated. Her instincts urged her to open the door, to help the poor creature. But another part of her, the protective mother in her, held her back. She reached for her phone instead. "Let me call Daddy," she said, pulling it out and quickly dialing. The phone rang a few times before Mark picked up. His voice was muffled, chaotic sounds from the emergency room were worked buzzing in the background. "Grace? Everything okay?" "There's a dog on our porch," Grace said, her eyes never leaving the golden retriever. "She's pregnant, and soaking wet. She hasn't moved. I don't think she's dangerous." "A golden retriever?" Mark asked, the concern rising in his voice. "Is she aggressive?" "No," Grace replied softly. "She just looks desperate." The dog took a small step forward, pawing lightly at the door. "She looks like she needs help, Mark." Before Mark could respond, Ollie's small voice piped up again. "Mommy, maybe she got hurt saving someone," he said, his eyes full of innocent empathy. "Like in the movies. Maybe she's a hero." Grace's breath caught again. Leave it to a child to see what adults might overlook. "She didn't mean to hurt anyone," Ollie added, almost reading her mind. "But she still got hurt. I think she's just a mama who needs help." Grace looked down at her son, awed by his intuition and compassion. Then she turned back to the golden retriever. The dog hadn't moved from her spot, her gaze still fixed on the family inside. Grace's fingers tightened on the doorknob. "It's okay, girl," she murmured through the glass. "We're going to help you." She turned the knob slowly and opened the door just enough to let the dog scent in, wet fur and mud, but also something familiar, comforting. The dog didn't make a sound, didn't try to force her way in. She just waited. Grace stepped forward, crouching slightly. Her eyes scanned the collar around the dog's neck, an empty metal ring where a tag had likely once hung. "No identification," she murmured. Tentatively, She reached out a hand and ran her fingers gently over the dog's soaked fur. The golden retriever didn't flinch. Instead, her body relaxed slightly, and her breathing, though heavy, began to slow. "We need to dry her off," Grace said, standing up. "Ollie, sweetheart, can you go get some old towels from the laundry room? The ones in the bottom drawer." Excited to help, Ollie nodded and darted off down the hallway, his little footsteps echoing as he ran. Grace took the opportunity to inspect the dog more carefully. She was clearly exhausted, her belly rounded with impending labor, yet her eyes still flickered with alertness. When Ollie returned with a bundle of towels almost as big as he was, Grace smiled and took a few from him. "You want to help dry her off, honey?" she asked. Ollie nodded sullenly. "Yes, but I'll be very gentle, just like you showed me with Mrs. Peterson's cat." Grace crouched again, guiding her son. "Okay," she said. "Just gentle pats." Ollie knelt beside the dog, his movements careful and slow. He reached out with the towel and began patting her back. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe now. The scary storm can't get you in here." To Grace's amazement, the golden retriever turned her head toward Ollie and gently licked his hand. Ollie gasped in delight. "Mommy." "She kissed me." Grace chuckled, a warm smile spreading across her face. "I think she knows you're trying to help her." Just then, the front door creaked as Mark stepped inside, having rushed home when Grace called. He crouched down, holding out his hand palm up for the dog to sniff. "Hey then," he said softly. "You've had quite a night, haven't you?" The dog hesitated, then stretched her neck forward, giving his hand a tentative sniff. Whatever she sensed must have satisfied her, because she settled it in, her head resting gently on the towel. "She let us dry her," Ollie said proudly. "And she has puppies in her tummy." Mark gave Grace a questioning look. "Any ID?" Grace shook her head. "Just the towel. Nothing else." Mark frowned. "Well, what do you think we should call her?" Ollie studied the golden retriever's face seriously. The dog looked back at him with calm but sad brown eyes. "Mila," he declared after a moment. "Mila?" Grace repeated, surprised by the choice. "Where did you hear that name?" "From my book," Ollie replied. "About the brave princess who saved her kingdom. Princess Mila got lost in the forest, but she found her way home." Grace glanced at Mark, then back at the dog. "This Mila found her way to us," she murmured. Suddenly, another crack of thunder shook the house. For just a moment, lightning illuminated the yard, and all three of them froze. There was someone out there. A silhouette. A human figure standing motionless on their lawn in the rain, watching their house. When the darkness returned, Mila's reaction was immediate. A low growl rumbled from her throat. Her entire body tensed, her eyes fixed on the window, not the door. "Grace," Mark said quietly, stepping forward and pulling the curtains shut. "Get Ollie away from the windows." "Why is she growling?" Ollie asked, eyes wide. "Because whoever is out there," Grace said softly, her heart pounding, "Mila knows them. And she's afraid." Mark quickly locked the door and drew the curtains tight. "Let's move upstairs," he said in a thin but calm voice. He picked up Ollie and nodded toward the hallway. Grace followed closely, glancing back at Mila. To their surprise, the golden retriever was already moving ahead of them. Despite her condition, she instinctively seemed to know where to go. When they reached Ollie's bedroom, Mila circled once, then collapsed gently onto the rug beside his bed. "See, Mommy?" Ollie whispered as Grace tucked him in. "She knows where to sleep." Grace smiled through her nerves. "I see that." How quickly this animal had adapted to their home amazed her. She was protective, yes, but not in a threatening way. She was alert. Watchful. Like she had done this before. Try to get some sleep, okay? Grace whispered, smoothing Ollie's hand. Ollie yawned. The weight of the long evening was finally catching up with him. Okay, Mommy. Good night, Mila, he said, reaching down to gently pat the dog's head one last time. Grace turned off the light and closed the door quietly. Later that night, unable to sleep, she tiptoed out of bed and headed to Ollie's room to check on him again. Mark had finally dozed off, exhausted from both work and the evening's events. She pushed the door open softly, and froze. Ollie was sound asleep, his chest rising and falling peacefully. But Mila was awake. The pregnant golden retriever had somehow managed to climb onto the bed, despite her size and condition. She now lay curled protectively around Ollie, her body forming a barrier between the child and the rest of the room. Mila's eyes met Grace's instantly. They were calm, but alert. A silent message passed between them, "I've got him." Grace swallowed the lump in her throat. This dog wasn't just grateful. She was guarding her boy like he was her own. The moment was broken by movement downstairs. Mark stirred and sat up in bed. "Is everything okay?" he asked grubbily. I think she's going into labor," Grace said softly, rushing to his side. They didn't have much time. Grace sent Ollie to grab towels and blankets while she and Mark gently helped Mila down the stairs and onto a padded blanket in the living room. "Will Mila be okay?" Ollie asked, watching her with wide eyes as she panted heavily, her belly heaving with contractions. Grace gently stroked Mila's head. "Yes, I think she will," she said. "She's very brave and very strong." Once Ollie was out of earshot, Grace looked over at Mark. "Her contractions are close to death. We need to help her through this." Mila's breathing grew more labored, but she stayed calm. It was as if she knew Grace and Mark would take care of her. "You picked the right house, didn't you?" Grace whispered, brushing back the fur on Mila's forehead. Then came the moment of truth. With a final push, Mila delivered her first puppy. Barely larger than a man's hand, the tiny creature moved weakly, letting out the faintest of cries. "That's puppy number 1, Grace said, smiling as she checked its airways. "Breathing's good." "You did great, Mila." The dog lifted her head slightly, then returned to licking the puppy clean. She was focused, determined. The second puppy came quickly, and Mila cleaned it just as efficiently. But the third, something was wrong. Grace felt it the second the puppy emerged. The body was limp, motionless, still enclosed in its birth sac. Mila whined softly and nudged it, but the puppy didn't move. "Mark," Grace called urgently, "we need to help, now." Mark was already by her side. With quick hands, he tore the sack open and began gently rubbing the tiny body with a towel, trying to stimulate breathing. Nothing. He rubbed harder. Then suddenly, the puppy twitched. A shallow, shuddering breath. Then another. A weak, warbling cry escaped its mouth. Grace gasped. "You saved it." Ollie, watching from the couch with wide eyes, threw his arms around his dad's neck. "You saved the puppy, Daddy." Mark hugged him close, his eyes meeting Grace's. No words were needed, this was just the beginning. As if to underline that fact, Mila tensed again. Another puppy was on the way. The fourth arrived without complications, and Mila took to cleaning it just as she had the others. Grace and Mark quietly prepared warm towels and set up a cozy box for the newborns. "Do you think there's more?" Ollie asked. "I think so," Grace said. "She's not done yet." Sure enough, a few minutes later, Mila delivered the fifth puppy. All were accounted for. Each one alive. Each one warm and safe. They laid the puppies side by side and dried them off as Mila rested, her breathing slower now, more even. Mark looked down at the litter and chuckled softly. "We're gonna need names," Ollie's face lit up. "This one," he said, pointing at the puppy who had almost not made it, "is Sunny. Because he fought to come back to the sunny world." "That's perfect," Grace said, her voice thick with emotion. "And this one," Ollie continued, gently touching the tiniest puppy of the litter, "is Luna. Because she was born after the lightning." The family chuckled softly. Leave it to Ollie to come up with names that felt exactly right. Mark knelt down beside Mila, gently lifting her collar to examine it again. The leather was worn but well made. "What are you looking for?" Grace asked. "I don't know. Maybe a tag that fell off." Then his fingers touched something odd. A tiny lump in the inside seam of the collar. "Wait," he said, "there's something here." With nimble fingers, he worked open the stitching. Inside, folded small and nearly ruined by water, was a scrap of paper. He unfolded it slowly. There were only 2 words, and a phone number. "Help us." Grace stared at the message. Her breath caught in her throat. Mila hadn't just come for shelter. She had come for help. Before either of them could say anything, a voice called out from outside the house. A man's voice. Deep, unfamiliar, and sharp. Grace's blood ran cold. She rushed to the front window and peeked through a sliver in the curtains. No one. Then Mila growled again. But this time, she didn't look at the door. She looked at the window. Grace's heart sank. There might be more than one person outside. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911, speaking in a low voice as Mila continued to growl. "Someone's trying to get into our house," Grace whispered to the dispatcher. "And our dog," she scared. From upstairs came the sound of hurried footsteps and a door slamming. Then Mark's voice. "Grace. Ollie. Grace. Ollie." Mark's voice rang with a sharpness that Grace had only heard a handful of times before. It wasn't panic, but it was close. She hung up the phone, heart pounding. "I called 911, she shouted back, scooping up Ollie and motioning for Mila to follow. "They're on their way." She barely had time to react before she heard the sound of something downstairs, footsteps, heavy and fast, followed by the loud slam of the back door. Mark came into view a second later, flashlight in one hand, kitchen knife in the other. "It's okay," he said breathlessly. "I think he ran when he heard me coming down." Mila remained tense, planted firmly in front of the living room window, her body low and protective, a low growl still vibrating in her throat. Grace glanced down at the newborn puppies, miraculously asleep, for now. They didn't move until the flashing red and blue lights outside signaled the arrival of help. Mark unlocked the front door and waved the officers in. 2 uniformed officers entered quickly, one older man and a younger woman who looked sharp and observant. "Man," the older officer said, nodding. "I'm Officer Reyes. This is Officer Bennett. Your husband said someone tried to break into your home?" Grace stepped forward, still cradling Ollie in her arms. "Yes. A man was outside, and we think he might have tried the back door too. Our dog," she alerted us. Bennett turned her gaze to Mila, who now stood in front of the puppies, watching the officers warily but not growling anymore. "That's the dog?" she asked. Grace nodded. "She came to us tonight, during the storm. She's a golden retriever, and pregnant. Well, she was pregnant. She just gave birth." Officer Reyes raised his eyebrows. "She's yours?" "No. I mean, not really," Grace replied, then explained quickly. "She showed up on our porch in the rain. She looked like she needed help. No ID. Just a collar with a tiny message hidden inside." She handed over the folded note. Bennett read it aloud. "Help us." And a phone number. She looked up at Reyes. Someone wanted her to find help. The two officers exchanged a glance. "I don't like this," Reyes muttered. "A pregnant dog shows up injured and hiding a message, and now someone's trying to break in. That's no coincidence." He turned back to Grace. "Do you mind if we take a formal statement? And we'll also need to take some pictures of the dog, her Talon, and the puppies." "Of course," Grace said. Her hand instinctively moved over Mila's head protectively. "But do you have to take her with you?" Bennett knelt down slowly, letting Mila sniff her hand. "Normally, yes," she said. "But with newborns this fresh, moving them would be dangerous." Reyes nodded. "For now, the best place for them is right here." Bennett stood in, her eyes serious. "But we'll post a tower outside your house. Whoever this guy is, people who hurt animals, and people, rarely give up easily." Mark wrapped his arm protectively around Grace's shoulders. "What do you think Mila was running from?" he asked. Bennett shrugged. "We don't know yet. But the Talon, the message, someone out there trusted this dog to find help." They paused as a small voice chimed in from the couch. "She came here to find help for her real mom," Ollie said, his eyes full of innocent certainty. "She knew we would listen." The adults were silent for a moment, struck by the simplicity and the weight of his words. "Out of the mouths of babes," Grace whispered. Later that morning, once things had settled a little, the family huddled together in the living room, too wired to sleep. Mila lay beside the puppies, occasionally glancing toward the window, ears perked and alert. Every now and then, she let out a small grunt or shift her body slightly to shield the pups. Her instincts were remarkable. Grace couldn't stop thinking about the message in the column. "Help us." Someone must have trained Mila to deliver it. Someone had trusted her deeply. Who? Eventually, Mila seemed to relax enough to rest her head, though she kept one eye half open, just in case. Mark whispered, "We should try to sleep. Even just for a little while. The Lees are watching the house. We're safe for now." Grace nodded, but she couldn't imagine sleep coming easily. Still, they pulled out the sofa bed for Ollie and set up the puppies nearby in a worn laundry basket loaded with towels. Mila lay right beside it, watching every movement. The next few hours passed quietly. Tense, but quiet. Until Mila stirred suddenly. She lifted her head, ears rigid. Her nose twitched. She stood and walked slowly toward the back window. Mark followed, drawing back the curtain slightly. "The police tower is still out front," he said. "I don't see anything else." But Mila stayed then, staring, her eyes fixed beyond the glass. "She's sensing something," Grace whispered. Later that day, once the morning had brightened slightly and the rain slowed to a drizzle, Mila became even more restless. She kept walking in circles around the back door, occasionally pawing at the corner of the rug that lay near it. "I think she wants to show us something," Ollie said. "Like in my Lassie book. Dogs always try to lead people when something's wrong." Mark and Grace exchanged a glance. It did seem like she was trying to draw their attention to something. But what? "I'll call Officer Bennett," Grace said, reaching for her phone. After explaining Mila's odd behavior, the officer agreed to stop by again, just to be safe. When she arrived, Mila ran immediately to the back rug, pawing a ding at the edge. "I think she's trying to dig," Grace said. "Let's move it," Mark added, pulling the rug aside. Sure enough, beneath the rug was a slightly loose floorboard. Mila nosed at it, then looked up as if urging them to act. Mark crouched down and used a screwdriver to gently pry the board free. Underneath was a small cavity filled with dust and soil, and something metallic. "There's something here," he said. "Help me clear it." They carefully dug with their hands until a small rusted metal box came into view, about the size of a hardcover book. "Is it treasure?" Ollie asked, his voice tinged with excitement. Bennett stepped in quickly. "Sir, I need to ask you not to open it yet." She donned gloves and carefully removed the box, placing it into an evidence bag. Grace whispered, "It was hidden here. She must have buried it, or helped someone bury it." Or, Bennett said, eyes narrowing, "someone buried it and trained her to come back when it was safe." Mila stood quietly nearby, watching every move. "Whatever's in this box," Bennett continued, "someone risked everything to hide it. And this dog, she's the key." Ollie knelt beside Mila and wrapped his arms around her neck. "You're the smartest dog ever," he said. Even the adults couldn't help but smile. Detective Harper, whom Officer Bennett had called for assistance, arrived soon after. He inspected the box, nodded, and handed it off to a technician. "I'll get it to the lab right away," he said. "We'll let you know what we find. In the meantime, stay alert. If this is what I think it is, we may have something big on our hands." Grace felt a chill as she turned back toward Mila and the puppies. They weren't just caring for a lost dog anymore. They were part of something much larger. Detective Harper remained at the house for a while, collecting details from Grace and Mark. He was particularly interested in everything that had happened from the moment Mila arrived on their doorstep. "She's more than just a stray," he said quietly after reviewing the hidden message and listening to Grace describe the night. "Someone trained her for this." Mark nodded. "She knew how to act around people. Around kids. And she trusted us fast." Ollie was sitting cross-legged on the floor next to the basket of puppies, watching them wriggle and stretch in their sleep. Mila hadn't taken her eyes off them for a second. "She's not just smart," Grace added, glancing over at the sleeping dog. "She's protective. She knew we'd help." As the adults continued talking, Ollie leaned down and whispered to Mila, "You're a hero, you know that?" The golden retriever blinked slowly at him, then nudged his arm with her nose. Even exhausted, she still had room for affection. Just then, Harper's phone buzzed. He stepped aside to take the call, listening intently before his face changed. When he hung up, he looked at the family with a seriousness that made Grace's stomach drop. "We got something from the box." Everyone quieted. There was a USB drive inside, he explained. It belonged to a woman named Lily Mercer. Grace blinked. "Who's that?" Harper nodded toward Mila. "Her owner. At least, we think so." "Where is she now?" Mark asked. Harper hesitated. "Missing." A silence fell across the room. "The drive contains video footage," Harper continued. "Evidence of horrific conditions in an animal breeding facility. Malnourished dogs, filthy kennels, some dogs barely clinging to life. There are even financial records suggesting that the breeder was selling dogs to a research lab." "That's..." Grace couldn't finish the sentence. "Who would do something like that?" Mark asked, anger creeping into his voice. "The name tied to the documents?" Harper said. "James Miller." Grace and Mark exchanged a look, one of recognition and dread. "That's the man who tried to break into our house," Mark said. "The very thing," Harper confirmed. Lily Mercer had apparently been working to expose him. This box, this drive, might be everything she was trying to deliver to authorities before she disappeared. "Do you think he..." Grace couldn't bring herself to say the words. "He's our prime suspect," Harper said grimly. "And Mila? She likely escaped from him. Or from somewhere else he had her. She made it here, maybe because Lily trained her to bring that message if anything ever happened. But that means Mila's been carrying this mission," Grace said, voice trembling, "alone. She risked everything," Harper agreed. "To save her owner. And maybe a whole lot of other dogs." Ollie looked up from the basket, his voice soft. "She's not just a hero. She's a rescue hero. Like in the stories." Grace knelt beside him and ran her fingers through Mila's fur. Yes, sweetheart. She really is. Just then, another officer entered the room. Detective Harper, we've got confirmation. Lily Mercer has been located. Everyone turned sharply. She's alive. She's in a wheelchair, the officer continued. Currently at a nearby safe location. She's been under protective care, but she insisted on coming as soon as she heard Mila was found. Grace put a hand over her mouth, emotion hitting her all at once. She's here? Mark asked. The officer nodded. She just arrived outside. Moments later, the front door opened, and a paramedic reeled in a pale woman with sunken eyes and dark circles under them, but her gaze was alert, and the moment she saw Mila, her whole face lit up. Mila, she whispered. The golden retriever's ears perked up. Her body jolted upright. Then she moved, slowly but surely, with a limp in her step and deep fatigue in her muscles. She padded across the room and pressed her head gently into Lily's lap. Lily's hands trembled as she stroked Mila's face. You found them, she whispered. You actually found them. Ollie stepped forward, carrying the laundry basket filled with puppies. Mila had babies at our house, he said proudly. Lily's teary eyes widened. Oh, Mila. Mark spoke gently. She arrived the night of the storm. She wouldn't leave our porch. She chose us. Lily reached out and touched Ollie's hand. She knew you'd listen. That's what makes all the difference. Grace could barely hold back tears watching the reunion. Do you want to hold them? Lily nodded, and one by one, Ollie helped show her the puppies. This one's Sunny, he said. Because he fought to come back. And this one's Luna. She was born during the lightning. Lily laughed through her tears. You gave them beautiful names. Are you going to take them home? Ollie asked. Lily hesitated. Well, that depends. On what? If Mila wants to stay with you, she said, smiling softly. She found you. Maybe, she belongs with you now. Ollie looked at his parents, unsure. We can talk about it later, Grace said gently. For now, just rest. Lily nodded. Miller, found out I had evidence, she said quietly. 3 weeks ago, he cornered me at the park while I was walking Mila. Threatened me. Said no one would believe me. He has friends in the county office. Said he'd make me disappear. You don't have to talk about it now, Grace offered, but Lily shook her head. No. I need to say this. Her voice wavered, but she pushed on. I hid everything I had in that box. Gave it to Mila. Trained her to bury it somewhere safe, just in case. And I told her, if something happened to me, to find people who would help. She did, Grace said, her voice trembling. She found us. She saved me, Lily said. And now, she saves herself. That night, the family stayed together in the living room. No one wanted to sleep apart. Not with everything that had happened. Mark pulled out the sofa bed again for Ollie, and Grace set up a cozy space for Mila and her puppies nearby. Lily remained in her wheelchair, close enough to reach down and stroke Mila's head every so often. As the last lights dimmed, Mila shifted again, her ears twitching toward the window. But this time, there was no growl. Just stillness. She stared, not with fear, but with knowing. Like she could finally rest. The following morning was gray and heavy, the clouds still thick from the night before. But inside the Crawford home, there was a sense of quiet resilience. Mark had taken the day off from the hospital. Grace did the same. It didn't feel right to leave, not now. Not with everything they had just witnessed. Not with Mila and her newborn puppies resting peacefully in the corner of their living room, and certainly not while Lily Mercer, brave and bruised, sat nearby watching her best friend nurse her tiny litter. The quiet was broken by the return of Detective Harper, who came bearing a large manila envelope and an even heavier expression. "We've identified everything on the USB," he said, taking a seat at their kitchen table while Grace poured in coffee. "Is it what you thought?" Mark asked. Harper nodded grimly. "Worse." He opened the envelope and spread out several photographs, evidence taken from the files on the USB. The images were hard to look at. Rows of metal cages stacked on top of one another. Dogs with protruding ribs. Empty water bowls. Floors matted with filth and fur. Grace covered her mouth. "There were over 60 dogs in total," Harper continued, "many of them in critical condition. Some didn't survive. Miller ran what he called a breeding operation, but it was nothing short of abuse. Neglect. Exploitation. And the research facility?" Mark asked. Harper nodded. "We traced the payments. He was selling dogs for testing. No oversight. No documentation." Ollie, who had been coloring quietly near the fireplace, looked up at the word testing. "What does that mean?" he asked. Grace stood and walked over, kneeling beside him. "It means some people were hurting animals. For money." Ollie looked over at Mila, who lay calmly nursing her puppies. "But she escaped." "She did," Harper confirmed. "And she brought us what we needed to stop him." "But," Grace began, her brow furrowed. "If Lily had this evidence weeks ago, why wasn't it already in the hands of the authorities?" Harper glanced at Lily, who sat quietly listening, hands folded tightly in her lap. "Because I didn't trust the local sheriff," she said, her voice thin but steady. "Miller had connections. He knew I was coming for him before I even filed the complaint." Grace moved to her side. "So you waited?" "I planned to go to the state attorney's office," Lily said. "But then, he found me. Threatened me. I had to disappear." She took a deep breath. "Mila was my last hope." Ollie stood and walked over to her, placing a small hand on her arm. "She did it. She saved you. She saves everybody." Lily looked down at him, tears brimming again. Yes, she did." Harper cleared his throat, then set down another photograph, one of James Miller in handcuffs. "He's in custody now," Harper said. "We got him last night. The officers you called during the break-in caught him sneaking around the neighborhood again. Mila attacked him, buying us just enough time to get them." Grace gasped. "She saved Mark. She knew." Harper nodded. "She had already risked everything once. And she did it again." "He had a gun," Mark said softly. "If Mila hadn't stopped him." The words trailed off. Ollie's voice filled the silence. "Mila's not just a mom. She's a superhero." The adults couldn't argue. Harper leaned back in his chair. "Miller has confessed to multiple crimes: animal cruelty, illegal trafficking, attempted kidnapping, attempted murder. The USB sealed the case. And he's already given up names." Grace blinked. "Names?" "2 county officials who helped him avoid inspections in exchange for cash," Harper said. "We're already building charges against them too." The house fell quiet again. The weight of it all settling in. Justice was on its way, but the cost had been tremendous. Lily shifted in her seat. "And the dogs at his facility? They're being moved to shelters and foster homes. Some of them may still find families," Harper said. "Thanks to him." He looked at Mila. The golden retriever didn't respond, her focus still entirely on her nursing pups, but the room seemed to shift around him. As if everyone realized, in that moment, just how extraordinary she was. Later that evening, the mood began to lift slightly. Mila was recovering well from her injury, the vet had confirmed, and her puppies were strong and feeding with good energy. The family gathered again in the living room, this time with hot cocoa, warm blankets, and the comfort of knowing they were safe. Lily remained close to Mila, often brushing her thumb or whispering softly to him. There was a bond between them deeper than anything Grace had seen. As for Ollie, he sat by the basket of puppies like a little guardian, keeping track of who had eaten, who had napped, and who had tried to crawl out of the blankets. "You're going to have to name them all," Grace said gently. "I already did," Ollie replied proudly. "This one is Sunny. That one's Luna. And this one, Inch," he gently held up the smallest, "is Willow." Mark smiled. "What about the rest?" "Toby and Clover," Ollie answered immediately. "Clover has the spot on her paw." Lily laughed. "You really know them, huh?" "They're family now," Ollie said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. The room fell quiet again, a peaceful silence. "I almost turned her away," Grace said suddenly. "When she showed up on our porch. I almost didn't open the door." "But you did," Lily said softly. "And that made all the difference." Mila shifted again, eyes closed now, finally resting. She had done her part. She had come through the storm. Delivered the truth. Saved lives. And now, for the first time in what must have felt like forever, she could finally let go and simply be a mother. The days that followed moved slowly but warmly, like the first moments of spring after a long and bitter winter. Mila and her 5 puppies remained in the Crawford living room, nestled in a makeshift nursery crafted with tin, a soft blanket-lined laundry basket, space heaters for warmth, and round-the-clock attention from both Grace and Lily, who had taken up temporary residence in the guest room. Lily, though still recovering from her own ordeal, found healing in being near Mila and her puppies. And the family found themselves adjusting to a new kind of rhythm, one filled with feedings, gentle cleanups, and endless puppy-watching sessions. Ollie had declared himself the official puppy monitor. He spent his afternoons sitting cross-legged by the basket, gently petting the puppies, whispering encouragement as they learned to wobble and crawl. Mark would often peek in from the kitchen, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth as he watched his sons' growing bond with the little lives they'd helped bring into the world. "This house feels different," he said one morning as he handed Grace a cup of tea. "It feels full," Grace replied. "But in a good way." She paused, her gaze falling on Mila, who was resting peacefully near her puppies, her head occasionally lifting to check on them. "She still sleeps with one ear up," Grace whispered. Mark nodded. "She hasn't stopped protecting them, even in sleep." "She hasn't stopped protecting us either," Grace added. That evening, as twilight painted soft pinks across the sky, Lily brought up a conversation the family had quietly been avoiding. "I'll be well enough to go back to work soon," she said, her tone calm but a little distant. They were all gathered around the living room again, Grace knitting, Mark scrolling through updates on his phone, and Ollie lying on his belly by the puppies, narrating their every tiny movement. Nobody responded right away. "I've been offered a place near the rescue center," Lily continued. "I could foster dogs and still stay close to Mila, if she wants to come." She turned to the golden retriever, who was now dozing with her head on Willow's back. Ollie sat up, visibly conflicted. "But, if Mila leaves, won't she miss her puppies?" Lily nodded gently. "That's why I'm bringing it up now." There was a long pause. Grace finally spoke, her voice careful and soft. "I don't think we can keep all 5 puppies, Ollie. But we can't let them go to strangers either. They're part of our story now." Mark agreed. "We'll find homes for them. Good ones. People we know. People Mila would trust." Ollie's eyes filled with quiet sadness. "Do they have to go?" "Not all of them," Grace said with a smile. "How about this, we keep one. Just one. But you get to decide who stays." Ollie's eyes scanned the puppies like he was being asked to choose among stars. "Willow," he said at last. She was the smallest. But she's brave. Grace nodded. Willow stays with us. Mark added, Sonny can go to Grandma and Grandpa's farm. He'll love the space. And Toby, maybe he could stay with Lily? Lily smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes. That way Mila won't be alone. Ollie seemed to brighten at that. What about Clover and Luna? There was a moment of thoughtful silence before he said, Officer Bennett really liked Luna. Everyone laughed gently. It was true. During her visits, Officer Bennett had always made a point of sitting with Luna, playing with her ears and cooing at her tiny barks. I could ask her, Mark offered. She might love the idea. And Clover? Ollie tilted his head. Maybe she could go to Detective Harper. He's serious, but I think he needs a happy puppy. Grace chuckled. He might just agree to that. With the fates of the puppies now settled, a soft peace returned to the house. It felt like a resolution, like a circle closing. Mila, though still healing, began to show signs of growing comfort. Her limp had improved, her appetite returned, and she had started doing little house rounds, walking room to room and checking on each person as if taking silent attendance. Sometimes she curled up by Ollie's bed at night. Other times, she lay by the front door, watching with soft, alert eyes. The break-in had shaken them all. Even with Miller behind bars, a hint of tension lingered like a distant echo. But Mila's presence, calm, alert, steadfast, made them all feel safe. One morning, as birdsong replaced the usual patter of rain, Mila did something they hadn't seen her do before. She wagged her tail. It wasn't just a wag of recognition, it was joy. She pranced briefly around the living room, tail swishing, nudging Ollie's hand, then dashing gently to Grace, licking her fingers. It was as if a light had returned to her. She's happy, Ollie said. Yes, Grace whispered. She finally knows she's home. Later that week, Mila was officially released from veterinary supervision. Dr. Haddons himself delivered her final checkup and pronounced her healing beautifully. Her shoulder would remain tender for some time, but there was no lasting damage. The puppies, now nearly 4 weeks old, had begun to walk, if you could call their wobbling a walk. Willow in particular followed Ollie everywhere, tail wagging like a flag in the breeze. And though there was still paperwork to fill out, Grace and Mark had already decided Mila would stay. Lily, watching this unfold with quiet pride, had made her peace. I think she chose you, she told Grace one evening as they watched the puppies curl into a sleeping pattern. She came to you when she had nowhere else to go. She brought the truth to your door. And you opened it. Grace took Lily's hand. But she never stopped loving you. That never changed. No, Lily smiled. But now, she has more than one family. And so, as the sun dipped once more below the horizon and the stars began to claim the night sky, the Crawfords tucked in a little more tightly, held each other a little more closely, and let the warmth of new beginnings wrap around them. Mila lay quietly in the middle of the living room floor, surrounded by her puppies, her people, her purpose fulfilled. Life had found a new rhythm in the Crawford home. Each day brought tiny milestones, puppies learning to climb over cushions, to bark for attention, to eat on their own. Grace had started calling them her 5 little thunderclaps, in honor of the storm that had brought Mila to their doorstep. Mila, now fully walking again, had blossomed into a symbol of quiet strength. Though she still carried the scar on her shoulder, it seemed more like a badge than a wound. She had moved past mere survival, she was thriving. And somehow, in all the chaos and healing, a quiet joy had taken root. Ollie had fully embraced his role as caretaker. He made puppy charts, assigning names to squeaks and tracking which one had eaten first or barked the loudest that day. He even made a rotation chart of who got a nap on his pillow, though, in truth, Willow had claimed that spot full-time. Willow was the tiniest, but also the boldest. She followed Ollie like a shadow, her golden fur bouncing with every clumsy step. Mila often kept a watchful eye on her from a distance, giving the pup space to grow while never straying too far. One afternoon, while Mila napped in the sun and the puppies wrestled in a heap, Grace found herself standing at the kitchen window, staring out at the yard. Mark joined her silently, placing a hand on her back. "I never thought all this would come from one storm," she said softly. "From one knock at the door," Mark added. "She changed everything." Grace nodded. "She made us better." A few days later, the time came for the puppies to leave. Ollie didn't cry, at least not at first. He helped pack small bags of toys and blankets for each pup, along with handwritten notes about their favorite foods and sleeping habits. "Toby's a deep sleeper," he told Lily, placing the puppy in her arms. "But he hates loud sounds." "I'll remember that," Lily said with a smile. "He'll be happy with me and Mila." She paused, then knelt beside Ollie. "I'll bring him by to visit, okay?" Ollie nodded slowly, then threw his arms around her neck. "Thank you for sharing Mila with us." Lily's voice cracked. "Thank you for giving her a second chance." Later that afternoon, Sunny was delivered to Grace's parents at their countryside farm. Mark carried the bouncy puppy in a box filled with towels and treats. "He's going to love it out there," Grace whispered. "Fields to run in. No fences. And Grandpa's chickens to chase," Mark chuckled. Clover and Luna were next. Detective Harper was the first to arrive, looking uncharacteristically nervous in civilian clothes. When Ollie placed Clover in his arms, the gruff man blinked quickly behind his glasses. "She's got a spot on her paw," Ollie explained. "And she's shy at first, but she's really smart." Harper nodded, his mouth tightening into what might have been a smile. "She'll be safe with me." Officer Bennett arrived just after sunset. Luna, sensing her energy, leapt into her arms with zero hesitation. "She chose you," Ollie said, grinning. "I'm honored," Bennett whispered, her eyes soft. "She's got spirit." And just like that, the house grew quieter. That evening, the Crawfords sat together on the living room floor. Willow curled against Ollie, her tiny body already dozing. Mila lay beside them, one paw draped protectively over both. "I know they have to go," Ollie said quietly. "But it's hard." "I know, sweetheart," Grace said. "But look what we gave them, homes. Families. And they'll always be connected," Mark added. "Because they started here. Together." Grace looked at Mila, her gaze gentle. "And it was all because you trusted us." Mila looked up at them, blinking slowly, and gave a soft wag with her tail. Weeks passed. Lily had moved into a small cottage near the edge of town, close enough for frequent visits. Mila would often spend afternoons there, while Willow remained at the Crawford home, curled under Ollie's bed or bouncing through the backyard with a squeaky toy. And then came the day of the courthouse hearing. Mark and Grace accompanied Lily, sitting behind her as she testified about everything: Miller, the breeding facility, the threats, the attack. She didn't tremble. She didn't falter. And Mila, seated quietly beside her in the courtroom, watched with calm, alert eyes. The judge listened carefully. And when the sentencing came, it was swift. James Miller was found guilty on all counts: animal cruelty, illegal trafficking, attempted murder, and obstruction of justice. The two county officials who had taken bribes were also charged and removed from office. Lily exhaled as if she hadn't breathed in weeks. "It's over," she whispered. "No," Grace said. "It's just beginning." Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Cameras flashed. Questions flew. But the photo that made the headlines the next day was not of Miller in cuffs. It was of a brave golden retriever sitting calmly beside a young boy and a woman she had saved, with her head high, eyes steady, and Willow curled beside her paws. The caption read, "Hero dog saves family, exposes crime ring." Back home, life returned to its quiet normal. Ollie went back to school, though his show and tell presentations would forever be unbeatable. Grace resumed her freelance work, and Mark returned to the hospital. And through it all, Mila remained. She no longer slept by the door. No longer flinched at thunder. Now, she chased butterflies with Willow in the yard, lounged by the fire on cool evenings, and occasionally barked at squirrels with great determination. Her healing was complete. But her purpose? That had only expanded. She chose us, Ollie said one night as he lay beside her on the floor, running his fingers through her golden fur. Because she knew we would help. Grace smiled from the kitchen. And we did. No, Ollie said, shaking his head. She helped us. The quiet that settled over the Crawford household in the months that followed wasn't empty. It was peaceful. It was full of new laughter, routines, and the everyday beauty of healing. The puppies, now growing into strong, healthy dogs, thrived in their new homes. Lily would send weekly photo updates of Toby sleeping in her lap or learning to sit. Grace's parents couldn't stop talking about Sunny chasing butterflies and napping beside the horses. Luna had made Officer Bennett's patrol car her second home, and Clover, according to Harper, had taken to sleeping under his desk at the precinct. But the deepest bond remained between Ollie and Willow. They were nearly inseparable now. Whether he was reading on the couch, doing homework at the kitchen table, or playing in the backyard, Willow was by his side, ears perked, tail always in motion. She's like my best friend, Ollie said one evening as he brushed Willow's coat. She listens even when I don't talk. Grace watched them from the doorway, her heart warm. That's what real friends do. And Mila? Mila had become the quiet heartbeat of the house. No longer alert from trauma, no longer burdened with fear, she was simply present. Calm. Content. She still slept at the foot of Ollie's bed, though sometimes she curled beside Willow, their matching golden coats glowing in the early morning light. There were no more sirens. No more broken windows or whispered worries. Just warmth. And routine. And gratitude. But something else began to grow in that space, an idea. A legacy. It was Lily who first brought it up. We could start something, she said over coffee one morning. Something in her name. Grace tilted her head. What kind of something? A rescue, Lily said. But more than that, a refuge. A place for dogs who were failed by people. Somewhere safe. Somewhere they can heal like Mila did. Mark, listening nearby, set down his mug. You mean, a sanctuary? Lily nodded. We could call it Mila's haven. The idea took root immediately. Grace could already picture it, open fields, cozy kennels, shaded spaces for rest and recovery, a place where no dog was turned away. Ollie was thrilled. We could have Willow help train the new puppies, he declared. She can be, like, the assistant. And Mila? As if sensing her name spoken with purpose, the golden retriever lifted her head and looked around the room. Her eyes landed on Lily, then on Grace, and finally on Ollie. She stood, stretched, and walked over to nudge each one in turn. Almost like approval. The next few months were a whirlwind of planning and paperwork, meetings with local shelters, volunteers, and city officials. But the story had power. Mila's story. The bravery, the rescue, the courtroom revelations, it had all spread like wildfire through the community. Donations poured in. Offers of land. Supplies. Veterinarians willing to volunteer their time. By the end of the summer, the gates to Mila's haven officially opened. The first dog brought through the front doors was a skinny, trembling mutt with matted fur and frightened eyes. Grace kneeled down and extended her hand. It's okay, she whispered. You are safe now. And just behind her, Mila stood tall and calm, watching with the same eyes that had once pleaded through a glass door on a stormy night. She stepped forward and gently nudged the new dog's shoulder. He relaxed. And the healing began. From that moment, Mila became more than a rescue dog. She was a guide. A symbol. Every dog who entered Mila's haven seemed to sense her energy. They followed her lead. They learned calm from her calm. Trust from her trust. Even the most frightened ones eventually leaned against her side or shared her blanket. "She's like the heart of this place," Lily once said as she watched Mila thrilled on the porch surrounded by 3 new arrivals. "She doesn't need to bark. She just shows them." At home, Ollie had begun journaling his memories of everything that had happened. The storm. The knock at the door. The first time Mila licked his hand. "Are you writing a book?" Grace asked him one day. He nodded. "I want other kids to know they can help too." "That's a beautiful idea," she said. "Because if we didn't open the door that night," he said quietly, "none of this would have happened." Grace hugged him tightly. "She found us," she whispered. "And we were lucky enough to listen." That fall, on the anniversary of the night Mila appeared at their doorstep, the family held a small gathering at the sanctuary. Everyone came. Lily. Officer Bennett. Detective Harper. Even Grace's parents, with Sunny bouncing at their heels. They lit lanterns and released them into the night sky, one for each puppy, and one for the incredible dog who had brought them all together. Mila watched them float upward, her head tilted, her tail swaying gently. She knew, Ollie said, standing beside her. She knew who to trust. Mark nodded. And she knew we'd do the right thing. In the soft glow of lantern light, Mila stepped forward and sat down between them. Still. Proud. Home. In the end, it wasn't just about the storm. Or the puppies. Or even the rescue. It was about listening when someone, anyone, asks for help. It was about choosing kindness. About saying yes when it matters most. Because sometimes, all it takes to change everything is opening the door. And listening.